Views, and the time is just shy of 8:15, and you're still listening to News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidiri. We're going to be diving into a highly charged legal battle, and one that's raising important questions about freedom of expression, international law, and political designations. Hamas, the Palestinian Islamist group, has filed a legal petition to the UK government to have it removed from the list of proscribed terrorist organizations. This move follows their assertion that they are not a terrorist group, but rather a Palestinian Islamic liberation and resistance movement fighting against what we all know and understand to be Zionism and the obvious occupation in Palestine. And joining me this morning to break down the details of this case and the broader implications of this challenge is legal advisor to the case and also South African spokesperson for the case, Nadeem Mohammed. Nadeem, assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah so much for joining us and welcome to Salam Media.
Wa alaikum salam rahmatullahi barakatuh barakallah, and thank you for having me.
Pleasure's all ours. I think we can kickstart the conversation with just the basics. If you can just explain why Hamas is seeking to have its designation as a terrorist organization removed, and why is it so important that it is removed from the UK's list, and also what legal arguments are at the core of this case.
Just very quickly as an intro, Salayalo, when this matter started, and obviously it was embargoed until the press conference was released by virtue of the fact that the filing only happened yesterday, i.e. Hamas taking the British government to court. And naturally, as you understand, if it had leaked, if it was uncensored prior to then, it could have obviously created a difficulty or further obstacles with the legal application, and that obviously something we wanted to avoid. There was a book written by an attorney named Peter Harris. He was an attorney at a firm currently and then also known as Cheadle, Thompson and Haysom, a very well-known labor firm in South Africa, even prior to the abolishment of apartheid and even still now. And at the time, Peter Harris was a young attorney and he was working in the firm, and he represented a group of MK fighters named then as the Dalmas Four, and it became known as the Dalmas Trial. It was a very momentous occasion in the history of South Africa preceding the apartheid era. The Umkhonto were obviously, as you know, being the spearhead of the ANC, the armed wing of the ANC, and which came about from the proscription then, or prohibition, of the ANC as an organization and listing them as terrorists in terms of what was then a form or a version of the Terrorism Act. It's really grown legs and many heads now, and it is quite a monster. And it's something that really us as legal practitioners have been struggling with for quite some time. And I'm sure you may remember we've been involved in a few of these types of matters where we have to deal with this specific act, which almost is above all act. So it almost as though once you're listed or branded or charged in terms of this terrorism act, POC Tatara is the South African version of this terrorism act. Once you're charged with this, effectively there's nothing really that you can do. It's almost as though all rights matter except for the rights when you are charged or are branded in terms of the Terrorism Act. So going back to the trial, the Dalmas trial, and just really as a summary and a recap, the fundamental approach that was taken by the Dalmas Four and by the attorney Peter Harris at the time was ultimately that we won't plead to the charge because we are combatants in an armed conflict. And accordingly, we are not pleading to the charges of criminality, which is what you're charging us with. At that time, it was murder, it was bombings, it was those are the charges that were thrown against him. So I make this point because if you consider that in parallel to what is happening with Hamas, the entirety of Hamas was listed on the terror list already in March of 2000 and in November of 2001. But the armed wing of Hamas, the Al-Qassam brigades, had already been on that list since November, since March of 2001. So effectively what that does now from a legal point of view, it makes it a criminal offense to engage with Hamas in its entirety, to brandish any insignia, any symbolisms, to publish any articles, to organize, to meet with, to negotiate with, to do anything really that you would normally do with a normal organized party or an organization for which hopes to engage politically or in any other manner. It becomes a criminal offense. In fact, so much so that even taking these instructions from Hamas and in fact taking money from Hamas, which would have been a criminal offense had the attorneys
Mm-hmm.
done so, is something which is almost impossible. And then the overarching principle, which is we don't negotiate with terrorists, right? So it's quite easy. You list them as a terrorist organization, and that's the end of it. So
Mm-hmm.
proscription, which is what it is a prohibition, and it's in terms of the act you are proscribing them from being, from having anybody engage with them. When you do that, you're doing exactly what happened with the ANC, and until their unbanning in 1990, so they were banned for that entire period of time. That effectively limited the freedom. It limited their ability to resist, which is a fundamental human right. So, prescription of Hamas in terms of the act is actually a contravention of various articles of the European Convention on Human Rights. Because what it actually says is that you're not permitted to raise arms in resistance lawfully against an oppressive occupying regime, in this instance, Israel. And remember, the fundamental policy, the official policy of Israel is Zionism. And the official agenda of Zionism is the effective eradication of Palestinians and Muslims, whether they are Muslims or not, from that region completely.
Mm.
The OPT, which is the occupied Palestinian territories. So effectively, the only form of democratically elected political representation of Palestine being Hamas is now effectively eradicated. And this ultimately puts Britain as a complicit perpetrator of genocide against the Palestinians.
Mm, mm, mm. One of the arguments that Hamas makes in this case, I think you touched a bit on it, UK's proscription of the group itself. They're saying it goes against Britain's obligations under international law, specifically regarding the prevention of genocide and crimes against humanity. How do you see this legal angle, and do you believe the UK stance on this matter is at odds with international law?
South Africa has really pioneered these legal applications and these legal processes, specifically in the fight against Israel. South Africa has taken a stand, first with the application to the ICJ to declare Israel and its military leaders and political leaders war criminals in their contravention of the protection and prevention of genocide. When the ICJ judgment came out, effectively, fundamentally declaring Netanyahu and his two IC, as well as uh, the military personnel, as war criminals, and then
Mm-hmm.
subsequent thereto, issuing arrest warrants for them. And you must understand, these are real, tangible documents. This is if they go to many countries who are allies with Britain, just by the way, they may in fact and should be arrested. So effectively what you're saying is, and this is now de facto. This is not, oh, maybe it will happen and maybe it won't happen. This is the de facto position. So what you're actually saying is that if Britain continues to ban Hamas, which is the only politically, democratically elected organization within the occupied territories, if you ban them from any form of negotiation or discussion whatsoever, what you're actually saying is that there is no defense or resistance to the actions of war criminals.
Mm, mm,
So let's
mm,
put that into perspective a little bit. Let's understand it, just so that there's a lot of words, but let's just understand this. What you're saying is these are war criminals. They should be arrested at any stage. In fact, in territories which are allied to Britain, But yet, the only resistance against these illegal acts by these war criminals, being Hamas, is banned from doing so. So you're cutting off the legs of the Palestinians completely. In addition to the arms and the ears and the necks and everything else that you've cut already, you're now cutting off their legs and telling them, well, crawl, if that.
I think you make a really, really important point. I want us to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to touch a bit on, public opinion, and also if there's any kind of legal precedents that we can look at and maybe draw parallels also with this case. But we'll touch on those two important points after this short break.
Perfect.
Day by day. This is Salam Media.
You know, it's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil, triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
They say breakfast is the most important meal of the day, yet many children go to school hungry because of poverty. Penny Appeal South Africa's Breakfast Club aims to get a warm, hearty meal to underprivileged children so they can spend their day prospering in their schoolwork. Help feed a needy learner for only 5 Rand a day, or 150 Rand a month. Or visit our website www.pennyappeal.org.za or call 031 1100 573 to find out how you can donate. Penny Appeal South Africa. Small change, big difference.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042-203-1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Valley's Motor Spares. We supply motor spares and accessories for all makes and models of motor cars, LDVs, buckies, trucks, and earth-moving equipment. We deliver on time, every time. Please contact us via WhatsApp on 014-592-0925 or call 014-592-0925 or visit 28 Zenderling Street, Rustenburg. Remember the name, Valley's Motor Spares.
Abu Hurairah narrated that he heard the Prophet Muhammad, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, say, "In black seed there is a healing for every disease except death." This Ramadan, experience the health benefits of this ancient blessed seed by using the Tib Black Seed range. Black seed assists the body to boost immunity, regulate blood sugar levels, reduce inflammation, and act as a potent antioxidant. Experience a holistic approach to health by introducing the Tib Black Seed range into your Ramadan routine. Available in capsules, pure cold-pressed oil, and a vapor rub. Trust Tib Health Sciences for quality black seed products. For more information, visit blackseed.co.za. Available at leading pharmacies.
Connect and stay ahead with Salam Media. This is Salam Media, coming to you live from South Africa.
Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidiri, and we're still having, I think, a very, very insightful and eye-opening, interesting conversation with Attorney Nadeem Mohammed. He's part of the South African legal contingent that is supporting a case that is tabled by Hamas against the UK government to have it removed from the list of proscribed terrorist organizations. Nadeem, thank you so much for staying with us. Before you went on that break, I wanted us to touch touch a bit on very, very important points. Number one, the issue of public opinion, and also legal precedents to this case. I'm just, being a devil's advocate on this one. Hamas, the public opinion on Hamas, one might say, is highly polarized. Particularly after the 7th of October last year. How important is it for legal processes to separate from public sentiment and from also judicial decisions? And are there any legal precedents when it comes to similar cases that might influence the outcome of this one particularly?
So you raise a very good point and a very good question, Salayelo, because everybody only looks at 7 October. And everybody who has anything negative to say about the attack, and I use the word very lightly, of 7 October, really is only considering what happened on the 7th of October. Now, remember, and this is something that was raised in the papers in the application, remember that fundamentally, this is an occupation that has been going on since, what's it now, over 70 years. I mean, this is humiliation, unlawful occupation, raids, terror, which is what it is, by Israel on a vast and large scale, spanning decades. It's only that when they were at a point where they realized that we cannot continue like this anymore, because we will effectively be eradicated should we not do something about it, is when they launched this attack. And in doing so, which was a fundamental human right for the protection of their own species, if you want to call it that, because at that stage they weren't even regarded as part of the human family, really. Then all of a sudden the naysayers and the public, and very few, by the way, not everybody, but very few people came up and said, well, actually they are the aggressors. Now, it's easy to do that, and I'll tell you why it's easy for people to do that. If you're in a school and there's a bully, it's easier to make excuses for the bully than to go against the bully. And you make those excuses by saying, oh, but the guy that he bullied, well, actually, like, he was irritating the bully, so it's fair that the bully kind of smacked him around. That's the principle. Because human nature tells you, take the path of least resistance. Resistance being the key word. Resistance being the fundamental right. And armed resistance is that being an entrenched legal right. So how then can some, and very few people, say that Hamas, effectively, by doing what they did, was the aggressor? And let's assume for 1 hypersecond that that is the case. Is the reaction equal to the action that was taken, or is it far in excess of what was done, to the point of saying now this justifies complete extermination of an entire people? So that's just to put into perspective the issue of public policy. To answer your question insofar as precedent is concerned, December of 2024, the HTS, which is the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is the Syrian rebel group, as they were, the UN provided them with certain conditions, which, if the conditions were met, ultimately they would be removed of the terror list. One of those things, for example, was to show a truly inclusive transitional government, all right, according to the world body. So it's possible to do, and they were the ones, obviously, who took back the country and eradicated Assad the Assad regime from the territory. Then you look at, for example, Cuba, where the U.S. took Cuba off the U.S. to support as terror list, to say, well, okay, if they comply with certain conditions, they won't be regarded as terrorists or terrorist supporters as per the list and how the list goes. So it's possible to do, and it's been done before. And obviously, on our own home soil in 1990, the ANC were removed from the terror list. Remember, Nelson Mandela remained on that terror list well in excess, just by the way, of 1990. In fact, I think he was only removed somewhere towards 1997.
It was in the early 2000s. Yeah, really late.
In fact, you're right. In fact, you're right. Even the early 2000s. So what it did actually then is, if you want to talk about precedents, what it actually did then is it said that the president of a fully democratic and free elected, or the truly democratic and freely elected president of a democratic society, which is the Democratic Republic of South Africa, effectively at the time, who at the time was taken off all the sanction lists and all the embargoes and was free to trade with any and every nation across the world, had at its leadership a terrorist. So what is it actually trying to say? It's actually trying to say, well, you know what, we put you on there, but we'll decide if we want to effect it or enforce it. And if we don't want to enforce it or effect it, when you can become the president of a country and we'll engage with you. So from a precedent point of view, whilst it's critically important, because nobody will want to engage, and certainly nobody will want to even finance an organization like Hamas by virtue of the fact they're branding a terrorist, as you've seen in the South African context just recently, charges being laid against a local South African for providing for making a charitable donation to a charity organization, which was later branded as a terrorist organization, and by virtue of its later branding as a terrorist organization, he was arrested on charges of terrorism. So it is fundamentally important that this application is successful. It is important, this application, that Hamas be given the opportunity to be removed off the terror list and be or disproscripted as the application goes. And there is precedent for it.
No, definitely. I think we're going to leave it there, Nadeem. Thank you so much for giving us your time. And just quickly, it was actually in 2008 when Nelson Mandela was removed from the U.S. terror list. Imagine that. The man was already, 78, 79 years old by then. That was the only time he was removed. Only 2008. So, yeah, it clearly shows that there's clear precedence for this, and I think this is a case that we'll all be watching it closely. And Jazakallah so much for you for being part of that team and being the representatives of South Africa, again showing the solidarity that we have with the people of Palestine and just how our histories are so intertwined. Hope to chat to you soon in the not so distant future.
And you've done an great work, and please continue to do what you're doing. The show is amazing, and it really is sending huge waves through the media space, and we appreciate everything that you guys are doing. Jazakallah khair.
Pleasure's all ours. There was Atini Nadeem Mahomed. Yeah, I think very interesting conversation, very interesting case. And I think one each and every South African needs to look at very closely because I think it resonates with us so much. I mean, imagine that Nelson Mandela only removed from the U.S. terrorist list in 2008. Wow, it's weird. It's really weird. And I think it'll be interesting what the next steps in this legal battle is going to be. And hopefully Hamas will be successful. And I just wonder what will be the potential consequences for the UK also, but not just for them, for other countries that have also proscribed Hamas as a terrorist organization. I think it's these kind of steps that are very important and that are going to be very helpful when it comes to the support for the people of Palestine, and also the fight for self-determination. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. And we're not ending this conversation here. I think we're still going to have another interesting conversation after this, where we'll be speaking to the director of Riverway Law, Fahad Ansari. He's one of the legal minds also who's very, very actively involved in this case. He's the if I'm not mistaken, the director and principal solicitor at Riverway Law out in the UK, who have taken this case and are the ones representing Hamas. So yeah, really interesting times, really, really important case, and one with very, very big consequences. And we'll be watching it closely here on Salam Media and giving you the latest. We're going to take a quick break. News and Views will be back after this.